Hey, welcome back to this mini lecture. Here we'll be talking about applying critical pedagogy in the classroom, how you can do that. There are 5 steps. First, educate yourself. Learn content questioning main narratives. For example, if you're a history teacher, you could possibly study structures that allowed historical figures to be successful. On a lighter note, critical theory and pedagogy challenges dominant social structures and narratives, so those are things to look out for in your own self-education. Step 2, alter classroom dynamics. You want to try to change classroom layouts. Instead of having a traditional rows of students, when you have discussions, discuss with the desks in a semicircle or a full circle. 2, sit while leading discussions. This helps to level teacher-student power dynamics as opposed to when you're typically standing while doing this. And 3, move to discussion-based classes. This allows students to think critically and draw their own conclusions. Again, all these things are examples of ways to alter your classroom dynamics. Step 3, surface alternative views. Present non-traditional and traditional narratives together. 2, discuss multiple narratives, encourage drawing personal conclusions so that you're not telling students what the conclusions are themselves. 3, encourage students to dig viewpoints deeper. So just try to get away from superficial analysis. 4, probe students' thoughts with questions like, why do you believe that, whatever they're believing, and why is that a good thing? Or maybe, why is it a bad thing as well? Encourage students to challenge their beliefs, break from single narratives, and think independently. All of these should help to surface alternative views and foster critical thinking. Step 4, reassess your assessments. Traditional assessments can limit students, if you have true and false questions or multiple choice questions, they can be very limiting in terms of what they're asking and how students are thinking and responding. Try to ensure that as best you can to ensure that students foster critical thinking. And 3, encourage students to discuss, write, and focus on ideas, not their presentation. So get away from the superficial analysis of what's going on and more to the deep. Finally, try to encourage activism. Especially these days with online activism, it's relatively easy for students to become involved. But whether that has long-term impact is obviously debatable. But first, critical thinking. Think about critical thinking as being a cyclical process. Point 2, after you self-educate as an instructor or a teacher, encourage critical thinking in your students. Ideally, point 3, by encouraging critical thinking, students will ideally take these new ideas into their own communities. You can also be more proactive in doing this in point 4. Share opportunities for students to combat oppression. Maybe you can suggest marches that are happening in your local community, any types of demonstrations, say at a consulate, etc., or any types of organizations that help combat oppression. Whatever ones that you think might be of interest to students and that are responsible. Point 5, help students start clubs that surface student voice. And finally, 6, encourage students to talk about power and oppression with their family and peers. So it starts through self-education and goes into the students, goes out to the communities, and even goes to their family and peers. Here's some concluding thoughts. Critical pedagogy, as you might imagine, looks different in each classroom. Say if you're teaching history, you might want to challenge an event that is traditionally seen as progressive. In literature, you might want to question common cultural stereotypes found in books. If you're a science teacher, you might want to critique the impact of science discoveries on marginalized groups. Often all of this will involve finding common bonds between subjects, so the critical approach is not confined to only one area of education and culture. Think of critical pedagogy as being an overlying way of thinking of your teaching. And takeaways for yourself, things you might want to think about as you go forward. How can you implement critical pedagogy practices in your own classrooms? And which strategy have you found effective? And given all of this, you might want to share them with your colleagues and administration. That was applying critical pedagogy in the classroom. Thanks for watching. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.